Hey, folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, we've got Dave Birkett back. I should say the great Dave Birkett. It seems like we just had him on. It may feel too soon. I don't know.
No,
or can you never have
on.
enough Dave Birkett? Yeah,
you can't have enough. A little goes a long way, but the other problem is that Dave and I were doing real work on Sunday covering the Lions' huge upset victory while you were, I don't know, eating taffy on the Jersey Shore and on the boardwalk, hanging out with, what was her name, The Situation and Snooki and all these, all your favorites.
No, you're right. I was in Jersey, and we'll get to that. But I want to bring in Dave just for a second because let me ask you this, Dave. Carlos has, written some really, really nice columns. Not that he doesn't always, but he's been on a roll here. And then he wrote, and they've all been about the Lions, maybe one Wings column. And then he had a column off of the Monday press conference of Dan Campbell, where he basically wrote the coaches don't understand what the fans are cheering about. And I was just curious about your thoughts on that. Was Dan Campbell in a bubble, not understanding why the fans were so excited, or is Carlos right? He's just off in his own world, and he heard a little bit of noise and wasn't sure what it was all about.
Well, I mean, Carlos, when it comes to defending coaches or taking shots at coaches, it's only Matt Patricia's the only one.
Coach Patricia, please.
Doesn't. Yeah. No, I mean, Shawn, I think we've talked about this before on here and probably in press rooms around the globe too, that look, Dan Campbell was a Lions player, right? I mean, that's part of why he got the job, was his understanding of this fan base. And,
I know, maybe,
all it's been through. So,
I made me chuckle.
No, I think he gets to a large extent, why fans, the emotions that they have as they go up and down and, hate this team some weeks and love it others and want the best for it. And, sometimes even call for his job. I'm sure Dan understands that. And bottom line is, hey, they've struggled a lot this year and they got to win the other day. And so at least for a couple of days, things are hunky-dory.
What was your reason, Carlos, or your thought process, I guess, that he was kind of not quite understanding what was going on?
I don't think he understood the full scope of beating the Packers. I mean, I think like what I wrote was how they're very much in a tunnel. Coaches are very myopic that way during the season. It's just there's so much to take care of every week, up and down, especially in a really hard week like last week, through all the changes with the coach firing, with the Hawkinson trade. You got to get your team ready, and he would have taken a win over the Little Sisters of the Poor. I mean, that guy just needed to win really bad to end that 5-game losing streak. And yeah, I mean, he knows obviously it's a division opponent. The Packers are good, whatever. I don't think he really appreciates. He was here for really about a season and then he was hurt the other two, but he doesn't really appreciate how much the fans hate the Packers and how much the Packers have. He has no idea about the Aaron Rodgers to Richard Rodgers throw. He doesn't understand that part of it.
Well, he was in the NFL. What do you mean? He saw that. He knows that. He was not watching Lions games when who was he with at that time? Or I don't know. I mean, you don't understand the full scope of all that, of all the damage, psychological that the Packers have inflicted on the Lions over all this time.
Yeah, I know, Dave. I wish our listeners could see your face and what you're doing with your hand in your face right now.
You think he knows that? You think he understands that the Packers have tortured the Lions more than the Vikings or the Bears or the how much, all this stuff, all these last second throws and comebacks and the Matt Flynn. Do you think he knows who Matt Flynn was and what he did? He doesn't have that kind of granular level.
I'll bet you if you asked him what Matt Flynn did to the Lions, he would probably know that. But regardless, ask him next time. I do think on a macro level or micro level, he understands that. But on a macro level, like, what does it matter? I mean, the Packers stink this year. Like, I mean, the Lions aren't very good this year either. They got to win. I mean, they're 2-6 now. I understand fans would be excited that they beat the Packers because it's the Packers, but both teams stink. So what does it matter?
I want to ask you a couple of questions, Dave.
That's the kind of view that like this general sports writer, just the win, whatever. Both teams aren't very good, whatever. That's the kind of, sort of view, I guess, the national media might, take of.
This is not Michigan State college football. Michigan
this is as
State,
close as it gets.
2-6 and saves its season by beating Michigan. No, it's not. This is the NFL. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Okay, I want to.
This
Dave,
win. Go ahead, Shawn.
All right. I'm gonna try to compose myself here for a second, because this is the thing, and we've talked about this before. I think both of us have said this before, privately, publicly, to Carlos. We love Carlos, and we record on Tuesdays or Wednesdays or whatever, and through the week, and sometimes Carlos and I text. You see him, I see him sometimes. We talk on the phone sometimes. We have wonderful, just human to human chats. Or I'll read him or whatever we're doing. And when we get to the podcast and then I hear stuff like that coming out of his mouth, I'm like, okay, does that just undo the previous week? So here's two quick questions. One is a serious one about what you're just talking about, the fans. But I want to ask you the sort of non-serious one at first. How was it with just you and Carlos Sunday at Ford Field? And was Carlos just ecstatic? Because he kind of had the team from the opinion sort of platform. He was the man, the person. He was it. Was he giddy? Was he floating? How was that? What was that like, Dave?
It was good to be back with Carlos for once, because it's been so rare that I've seen him these days. I mean, big time, Carlos Minares now, I don't get to see him a lot. So it was nice. But Shawn, we looked down press row and we were like, is it really just us two? I mean, this is the Lions. And we were wondering where you were at. Yeah, no, it was kind of weird.
I got a reprieve. Actually, the weekend before, it's Michigan State was a night game and it was late. And, that's a tough turnaround, but it's something that we do. And our colleague, Jeff Seidel, had texted me right as I was actually getting ready to walk on the Ford Field last week for the Dolphins game and said, hey, why are you trying to make this turnaround from, middle of the night college football to this? I've got it. And I said, no, I'm already here. It's all good. He said, well, next week, don't worry about it. Don't come, because I had Michigan at Rutgers, which is a late night game and then plus travel, which is fine. You've done that before. Man, I don't know if you've ever done that turnaround before, but anyway, I said, you know what, Jeff, I might take you up on that. And so
it's Jeff that I need to.
Well, no, and Kirk didn't want me to do it. No. The truth is, Jeff had offered, but the truth is Kirk didn't want me to do it. And then I just thought, you know what, Carlos will love to have all that extra elbow room, all that, so he's the voice, and he wants to be the voice, and that's totally cool with me.
I just wish I was big time enough like you guys that, after those, Sunday road games, those, Sunday night games, when I take the red eye back, or, whatever the case is, traveling all day Monday, that I didn't have anything Lions to write. So maybe if I knew people like you guys, I really need to.
Well, you could still write. I
would
also wish I were big time enough like you, Dave, that to admit that the reason I'm doing that is because of youth basketball, or I want to see my kids, or I want to be home to eat my dinosaur chicken nuggets. It's not anything to do with work. It's everything to do with your own creature comfort habits, which I admire and I think is great. All right.
Well, that's why I leave late Saturday, not why I come home and go right to work.
Oh, I see. Well, no, we've been there. Well, look, we don't want to get too far down into this inside baseball. Oh, Carlos heard the word baseball. He's going to want to talk about baseball. Let's ask Carlos this, though, and it's just for both of you, because we need to hear from Carlos. Yeah, we do.
Well.
Oh, really? No, getting back to the fans and understand the Packers and your point about this isn't Michigan State. It's a weird feeling that a lot of folks had, right? Some didn't want to win at all because they're starting to think about the draft. And some won, and they sort of they enjoy that feeling. But can both of y'all sort of, I don't know if Carlos can, but I want him to try. Can both of y'all talk about the nuances here because it's not Michigan State having a terrible season and beating Michigan or vice versa. It's not the same, as you pointed out, Dave. What you think?
I'll let our esteemed Gus go first.
Well, I mean, look, I begrudgingly give Carlos a small sliver of credit for where he's coming from. Maybe Carlos is just a fan at heart of the Lions, and maybe that's what the problem is. Because I was driving home from the Lions practice facility Friday, and I had 97.1 on. The Valenti show was on, and he and Rico were talking to a fan, and they were asking whether you just said like giving up on the Lions, right? You want them to lose at this point, play for draft position. And I think most, I don't know how long I was in the car for listening to that, but the couple callers that I heard, it sort of, they were agreeing with Mike and Rico on that. And one caller said, I want them to beat the Packers because it's not because it was the Packers, because it was Aaron Rodgers. Really, he said, I don't want to see Aaron Rodgers happy. So I want to see this frustrated Aaron Rodgers that we saw. And then after that, I want the Lions to go on losing games and improve their draft position. So I say that to say, maybe there's a sliver of truth to what Carlos said, that there is this hatred for the Packers because they've owned the Lions for so long. But look, at the end of the day, we're talking about professional football, and we're talking about two bad teams, and neither team is, Lions didn't save their season by doing this. No one's going to look back on this season, and if they lose out, say, well, at least we beat the Packers when we went 2-15. It's still the NFL here. The Lions are still in the position where they're one of the worst teams in the NFL. They need to get this thing turned around, because beating the Packers shouldn't be the measuring stick for any team or any fan. It should be much greater than that.
Well, you know what? Dave is right. And I'm really glad no one at the Free Press writes something called power rankings in the NFL, because you know what? Wins don't matter. They're all the same. 1 through 17, it doesn't really matter. But as Dave knows, I mean, unfortunately, he's crafting a convenient narrative to suit his own. He should be, the opinion, formulation from Dave is really good. I mean, one day he's going to be a Shawn Windsor columnist and write 1.5 whole columns and then take 2 days off. But that's a ways off. But no, man, I mean, this is the thing. What did Dan Campbell say on Monday? We should have won 2 more games. He knows the Vikings and the Dolphins were right there in his hand. That's the kind of stuff that when you're talking about looking back on the season, whether it's the fans or whatever, the media, we're going to be looking back on these things too, as they were close. They could have won. They let them get away, but they were close in those games. They should have maybe won those. Sheila Ford Hamp is going to look at those too, as we were close in those games against teams that are looking pretty good right now, right? The Vikings and the Dolphins. So that means something. The quality of opponent means something. And even though the Packers are not a good team right now, they are still the Green Bay Packers. And it's been super hard to beat them. And winning at home, handing Aaron Rodgers' butt to him, having that funny meme with the phone call and hanging up, on the sideline, that means a lot. That means a lot to fans. And the folklore of what it means to be a fan, to hate Aaron Rodgers. And I don't know what you're saying about the caller. Like, I don't want them to beat the Packers. I want them to beat Aaron Rodgers. I think that beating Aaron Rodgers means you want to beat the Packers. I'm pretty sure he's on the team. But it means a lot. This is going to mean something. And let's not forget this. And we've talked about this before, Dave. Winning at home is a bigger deal for the owners, because you're not on the road by yourself with a smaller group on your private jet. You're at home, surrounded by all these friends and family and whatever. It's your time to shine as an owner in an NFL team. The congratulations, how it feels so much better. You feel it from the fans. You feel it from your close group. The celebration is more meaningful. And beating the Packers, I mean, and let's face it, NFL owners measure themselves against other teams, other ownership groups, other programs or franchises, right? The Packers are the gold standard in the NFL for how to run a franchise. So to beat them means something. Hey, we were able to do it. And especially because of everything that's gone on, how bad the season has been, how disappointing the 2-year tenure for Campbell and Holmes have been, to win like that, to end a streak at home, it means a lot more, and this is something that the greater point of the column was this, that they didn't stop the bleeding in this game. They're looking at maybe a 9-game losing streak. And we were talking about that in the press box while Shawn was, having his third dessert in, downtown Manhattan, the Waldorf Astoria, wherever he stayed on the company's dime. But we were talking about this, doing hard work. And we said, listen, the problem is it's not just, it's a 9-game losing streak or a 6-game losing streak or a 7-game losing streak. Those aren't just done in a vacuum. Every week, the pressure mounts. Every week, you're going to see more calls for Campbell's job. You're going to see more signs, more bags on people's heads. And you're going to see it's going to mount and mount and mount. And they couldn't just lose out. You could not keep Dan Campbell if it reaches 9-game losing streak. If you lose to the Jaguars at home, all these things, it's unsustainable. So this stopped the bleeding, and it calmed everything down, brought the temperature down. And this gives them at least reprieve for a few more weeks. We'll see what happens. But at least right now, people are satisfied. You beat a huge, a hated division rival. So I think that, what did you think on Monday? Didn't you think there was a difference in Campbell's demeanor, the whole vibe of the press conference, even on Sunday night?
Well, there was, but that's like you said, because they won. Like have they beat, had the schedule been reversed and had they played the Bears, 2 days ago and they beat the Bears instead of the Packers, or maybe that's a bad example because it's a division rival, but pick a team, right? Had that been the Jaguars, like he would have felt better because it's a win. And ultimately in the NFL, that's all that matters. Like it doesn't matter who you beat. We went through this with Jim Caldwell, right? Where they got mad that 2014 season. The Lions had a pretty good defense. They were a pretty good team. And I know Jim Caldwell was frustrated. A lot of people in the organization were frustrated because they felt like they weren't getting enough credit because all their wins were coming against crap teams. And they weren't beating the Packers were really good that year. If I remember, they didn't beat the Packers. Maybe they were the winning teams on their schedule. They weren't beating, right. This is part of the whole Matthew Stafford narrative. He could never go on the road and beat good teams. And so I know Jim Caldwell's first season and they thought they were doing some really good things and they were getting frustrated because people weren't giving them enough credit. And ultimately, you need to beat some of the good teams and you win some games like this against crap teams. Like, does it matter? Not a whole lot because the Packers are no good this year. Aaron Rodgers looks like a shell of himself. Like you got to 2-6. That's not anything to write home about. So does it stop the bleeding? Does it stop people talking about Dan Campbell's job? Yeah, for a week. But guess what? If they lose to the Chicago Bears, people are going to be right back calling for Dan Campbell's head again.
I disagree with that. If they lose, unless they get manhandled to Chicago, but if they lose, I don't think they're right back to where they were, during the 5-game losing streak. I think he's bought himself a little bit of time for goodwill. It all depends how the game shakes out. But if it's not a weird, you're going to question every timeout that Dan Campbell takes and give him a letter grade down in your grades every time that he does something wrong that you don't like. But
I've said Dan should stay. Like he's not in trouble right now, but everyone else thinks he. And look, I know that to your point, right? If they would have gone or if they go 2-15, like then you have this discussion. But I've never thought that was going to be the case, right? I've always said they're going to win 6 games or whatever.
You said 8 games or something like that.
Yeah, beginning of the season, I did. I thought they were going to be better. But even right now, even the last couple of weeks before they won this last game, I said they were going to win 6 or 7 games because I look at the schedule and the Jaguars are terrible and the Panthers are bad and the Bears aren't very good. So you can split with the Bears, right? The Packers aren't there are winnable games on that schedule that the Lions should get. So ultimately, when we look back at the season, we're going to say, you know what? They went 6-11 and they probably squandered a couple games that they should have won. And maybe they would have been 8. Maybe it would have given us hope and maybe we would have been in the playoff mix. But really? Are they? Is a 6-win Lions team or an 8-win Lions team that much different from a 4-win Lions team? Like in that moment, in the fans' eyes, or in that the euphoria of that victory, but not in the big picture of things because this is not a good team. And whether they finish with 4 wins or 6 wins or 8 wins, that's not going to change. They're not on the level of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles and the Buffalo Bills if Josh Allen is healthy and the teams that are legitimate Super Bowl contenders that you strive to be, that you want to be as an organization. The Lions are not that. And yes, they, need to take incremental steps to get there, under this regime. And, no one is asking for it to happen in one day, but beating the Packers doesn't make you appreciably closer to that goal.
But as you said, it doesn't happen in one day. In year 2 of the rebuild, isn't beating the Packers what you're supposed to be doing at least? Isn't that?
No,
that's not.
Oh yeah, the bare minimum. Minimum. You're supposed to beat these bad teams.
Right.
So I'm not giving the Lions credit for beating a bad team. Like, okay, you did something you were supposed to do. Go out and beat the Miami Dolphins when you have a chance, a pretty good team. Beat the Minnesota Vikings when you have them on the ropes on the road. Like win those games and you get a little bit of credit. Go 6-11 and beat the Panthers and the Jaguars and the Bears and the Packers and all these crap teams. And no, you don't get much credit in my eyes.
What I'm saying is they're supposed to be at least beating the bad teams, winning the games that are winnable, right? And as we find out, as we go through the season, I don't think anybody thought the Vikings were going to be as good as they are right now, but as we go through, that losing to the Vikings at the end of the season might look a little better if the Vikings are like 14-2 or 3 or whatever. I mean,
second best record in the NFL right now.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if they trend toward this, it's like, well, we lost to the Vikings. Right now, it feels like they should have won, but man, maybe they were better. And yeah, I know Campbell cost himself a lot in that game, but I'm just saying that you're right. The measuring stick really should be you're playing basically like a division lower. You're the JV team, and you should be beating the JV teams right now. That's the measuring stick. So I'm just saying that that's the right step in the progression, right, of beating the Packers at home. Well, losing to the Bears at Soldier Field, I don't think is going to be the end of the world. I think that's hard to win at Soldier Field, and the Bears aren't hopeless, So if it's a close game,
I would say I was just going to say, I would say you're right. It's on the right path, but I don't know that it's a step, right? Like you're not taking a step forward. You're just continuing along the line of the same thing. Like to take that step forward and have that progression that you talked about, to use that word, like that's when I think you need to start winning some of these games to actually be relevant.
All right. Let's take a quick break here. My head is hurting. I'm sure the listeners are too. Carlos can work on his insults and stop talking about Waldorf Astorias, which haven't been relevant for 50 years. But so we're going to give Carlos time to come up with some more modern insults. We're going to give Dave time to take a breather after trying to school our buddy here. And we're going to give Anjanette Delgado, who produces this podcast, time to slip some commercials in. And we will be right back with more Free Press Sports.
Pay some bills.
Let's pay some bills. We'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, we're going to get to Michigan football here a little bit. And Dave used to cover Michigan. Not that he's an expert right now. I mean, there's a lot more than you do about it, but that's a low bar.
By the way, he has volunteered to do a recruiting story for the Free Press whenever he's asked to.
Yeah, no, he loves recruiting stories. But let's
Carlos knows how much I love that.
Let's wrap up on the Lions real quickly. You guys just spent a long time there trying to figure out what it all means. I think you're both right in some instances. I mean, look, fans have a Pavlovian response in some ways. It's a subconscious, maybe even not subconscious, emotional response to a win. They just do. They can't help themselves. So there's a certain amount of joy in that. I agree with you, Dave. It doesn't. I mean, the Packers are part of it, but it wouldn't have mattered. It could have been anybody in there. Campbell would have responded the same way. The fans would have been relieved and had that joy. Maybe they had a little extra joy because they don't like Aaron Rodgers, and the Packers aren't a rival necessarily, but yeah, they do hate him. I mean, Carlos is
not a rival.
There's no. I mean, yeah.
The division.
Here we go.
Do you know the division the Lions play in?
They're not a rival in the sense that Michigan and Michigan State are. It's just not. It's not that way. First of all, did you go to your sport? It's not the Yankees and the Red Sox. It's just not. There's not that kind of. You know what I mean? God. It's just they don't.
Who's the Lions' rival if it's not the Packers?
They don't have a rival. I mean, they have teams they play in the division every year that they don't like. I'm sure there's. Right, but it's not. First of all, you got to.
Well, it doesn't, because the Lions haven't had success. It's not on the level.
Exactly.
But internally, Carlos, right, for the people here, right, they hate the Packers and the Bears, and right, those are the two teams I think they hate the most.
I think the problem with Shawn is that
right?
Shawn doesn't get.
I think Vikings are.
Shawn's in love with college football and the pageantry, and he used a word called mise en scène.
I think college football is.
He loves it. He loves
college football is
jump
a scam.
around.
I'm glad they're getting paid.
He loves the NFL doesn't have that. I mean, Shawn takes a shuttle to the doorstep of Ford Field, sneaks in through a back entrance, doesn't see the fans, doesn't understand the whole culture of the NFL. I mean, that's.
You know what? Carlos, you're right, because I think you hit it right. That like there is a difference for some people. It is about the pageantry and their alma mater and all that goes on with college football, and that's why they can live or die with their team. But for other people, it's about, I want to see the best product, and that's the NFL,
and that's what it is
for
the
Lions,
me, right?
Even though they're part of it, they haven't been the best product, and that's why I say, the NFL.
The NFL. I prefer the NFL, Dave. Right? I mean, but let me ask you.
I don't. You do not prefer the NFL.
Of course, I do. It's the same with the NBA. It's the level of the sport. To your point, Dave. God. Let me ask you this though, Dave. Yes. And Carl should know better because he's from a state that has a real professional rivalry. You mix up the Packers fans and the Lions fans as they've been the last 25, 30 years. If they were both beating each other periodically, I think it would be different. But you mix up the fans, how much fight do you get to see? You mix the Giants and Dodgers fans, and they're killing each other, literally, right? So,
well, yeah.
I mean, it's just a different kind of a thing. I get it. Lions fans don't like the Packers at all. They don't like the Bears either, right? They especially hate how the Bears take over their stadium every year.
Look, success. I think that's what it comes down to, right? And we're talking about, right, New York. There's not really college teams they root for there, but the Yankees have been extremely successful, right? The Giants. You go back in history, right? Like when they were great, like that rivalry with the Eagles or the Cowboys, those were pretty fierce rivalries, and we haven't had that here in Detroit. And so because the Lions haven't been good. And so I get why people are, why they love their Michigan and their Michigan State, and those rivalries mean so much to them and they live and die with it. And maybe a little bit of why they, to Carlos's point, why they some of that matters to them, with the Packers and the Lions when those two teams meet.
Well, no, they take pleasure.
Ultimately, I think that would be, if the Lions were winning games,
it would be different. No, for sure it would. But let me
I have to explain something.
Carlos,
Shawn,
one second, please, Carlos. Just let me say this real quickly. The Lions fans, to me, care more about the Lions than any other team in our area cares about, or any other fan base cares about their team in our area. And I include Michigan football in that. And I mean, I've been around Michigan football, like when Rich Rodriguez was there and so forth. There's an apathy that sets in, and I'm not saying there's not with the Lions, but the Lions fans are just a different kind of loyal, and the passion and the love and the way they put in the onesies from the start. And it's not because of the school. That's a different kind of identity. This is a broader, deeper thing. And of course that's true, but they just don't have, it's not like a collegiate rivalry. That's all I'm saying. Of course,
I never said it was.
Of course,
I'm
they're
not saying
professional.
It's a collegiate
of course,
rivalry.
they're professional rivalries. There are, but to your point, Dave, you're right. They just don't win enough. Okay, go ahead, Carl. Sorry.
I just needed to explain to Shawn, since I think he hates baseball, more than hockey, maybe. But like the Yankees and the Red Sox, there was a long time where the Red Sox were not good recently, and the Yankees were amazing. That rivalry still existed. And by the way, Shawn probably doesn't understand this, but the Lions have been around longer than the last, 10 or 15 years that he's been a columnist. So the Lions at one point were the team of the 50s, and the Packers were the team of the 60s. So even though the Lions have not been good for a long time now, and the Packers have been really good for like 3 decades, there's been a time where the Lions and Packers were actually both pretty good before the NFL became the NFL really and expanded and all that. But yeah, there's a history there, and even I think, the two teams, there's no question, Lions, Bears, because Chicago, Detroit, they identify more as Midwest rival cities,
right? And it's like Pistons, Bulls, right? I mean, they hated each other for a long time. Pistons, Bulls
had a huge, and Avalanche and Red Wings. That's NHL hockey for both of you, but there's rivalries that are based on excellence, recent excellence, and there are rivalries that are based on historical, competition and animosity, whatever. And I think part of it is at one time, the Packers and Lions were not that far away from each other. And now the Packers have just become this, the 800-pound gorilla, right, in the division and in the NFL. And you have Aaron Rodgers, and that's been part of it. If you ask any Lions fan, maybe if Shawn gets to a game more than 10 minutes early one of these days, he can go talk to some fans and ask them, if there's one team you could beat every year, who would it be? And
that's all I used to do. That's funny you say that. That's all I used to do is go to stadiums and hang out with the fans. I did that on the news. Don't give me the when you don't know. It's just, that's what I did on the news side for a while. It's in fact, I remember when I used to go to the Silverdome to do it, and all they did is fight. There was fist fights all over the place. I used to literally get sent to stadiums. That was part of my job. I wrote an undercover fan column, but I used to literally get sent to stadiums, Dave, to hang out and talk with fans. I hung out with tailgaters a decade ago. Remember, the parking, there's an old emptied out theater. I think it was United Theater. Anyway, that's now a parking deck. It's one of the coolest tailgating spots in the country. It's got to be. It's just down the street from Ford Field. I did that over and over and over and over. Carlos didn't understand that Lions fans actually cared until he was at my house a month ago watching my boys get upset when they lost to the Vikings. So what? All of a sudden he's an expert, and he wrote a column admitting he had no idea what was going on under his nose for the last 20 years. and now he's an expert. Dave, come on, man. What are we doing?
We're doing is making up the narrative of my column that is not true is what you're doing. But go ahead, keep going.
Dave,
tell me what I wrote, Shawn. Keep going.
My goodness. Do you remember?
No, I mean, look, you're right. I mean, the Silverdome brought out a whole different breed of fans. But look, Carlos, I think you did make a good point there, right? Like the Packers and the Lions. I mean, they were rivals back in the day. I don't know that matters to, Shawn's kids who were, 20 years from being born or 30 years from being born when that happened, and they can still live and die with them because, fans are so invested in the Lions and what they do. And it's great. I mean, it's great to see that. It's great for business. I can't imagine, being a fan of a team for this many decades and to have your heart ripped out and not win a playoff game like that and what keeps them coming
and
back.
And that's the point, right? That's what's
do.
Amazing about this fan base, right? That's it right there.
Great fan.
They keep coming back. Yeah, there's no rival in the sense of, I mean, I get it. The regional rivalries and divisional rivalries or whatever, but it's just, it's not right. Like you're right. My kids' age fans, they don't care. They want to beat the Packers because of Aaron Rodgers. To your point about the collar, right? Because he's disliked, right?
Right,
and that's
I think that's it, right? Like it's not just about beating the Packers and hey, we beat the Packers and no. Like you're right. They despise the Packers because the Packers have owned the division for 3 decades, and it went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and they're both kind of dislikable guys based on thing. But
I was curious what
if the Lions were winning. Yeah, I know. I mean,
it's a family show.
That's right. The Lions can't. They have just that team, that organization, all these organizations really have been what's been holding the Lions back. But more than that, it's been the Lions holding themselves back. And so I think that's why I say to whoever that win would have been against, it just was. And given the week that it came on after firing a coach and trading your tight end, like it was just a big sigh of relief for everyone. And like Dan Campbell said after the game, he needed to go decompress and drink a beer. And this is had to, get back to work, I guess, take a few days off, few hours.
I agree with me. This was a huge win that way because of everything that happened. Sheila talks the week before. Right. Brad Holmes says the weird ass, it's
a huge win for those reasons, not because it was Green Bay.
That's why it was a huge win. Can I just say this, Carlos? You're absolutely right. I mean, you could have actually written a column with a headline that, and this wouldn't have been complete exaggeration, that in some ways he saved his job. And I'm with you, Carlos, because if that rolls and you're ended up as a 2-win team, there's going to be serious pressure with that, right? I mean, he really did, and then you get the negative momentum. I completely agree with you, Carlos. You're absolutely right. I just understand Dave's point too, that it didn't really matter who it was; they just had to have a win.
All right, Shawn said I'm completely right. We'd like to thank Andrew Hammond for producing the show.
No, but it's true. I mean, you didn't necessarily need Dan Campbell didn't understand why it was such a big deal because it's a big deal for you and nobody else, and that's cool. That's fine. He
didn't fully appreciate it. Yeah, it's
your opinion, and that's cool. All right, we want to talk about. We got a lot of time to talk about Dan Campbell, right, Dave? Dave, let's talk about Michigan football. Carlos wants to do that. Carlos, what do you want to talk about?
You have to explain what Misan Sen means to the readers out there. Your highfalutin vocabulary.
Okay, let me ask you something. All right,
the literary elite out there.
Okay, Mr. Aloof, Mr. Look Down on the people you write for, or write to, maybe in your case.
I'm part of the common man. I relate to the
really.
Man.
Did you know what it meant?
I did know what it meant.
Okay, so you are assuming that nobody else does. Oh, I know what this means because I'm smart and I'm from Southern California. But these rubes here in the Midwest don't know.
Why don't you say I'm from LA? You never let me say I'm from. I'm always from
because you're not from LA. That's the.
I'm not. I didn't grow up in the Swingers movie, so I'm not from LA.
No, you're not from East LA either. Come on, man. It's LA. You didn't even have a fish taco.
If you count yourself as a Detroiter, I count myself as a.
You didn't even know what a fish taco was down in Orange County, hanging out with all those John Wayne Republicans. Come on, man. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
John Wayne Republicans.
Not that there's anything wrong with that at all. Oh man, these are my people, and everybody's my people. No, but seriously. It's seriously, God, now he made me lose track of what I was saying.
Michigan football, you loved hanging out with your
No, buddies. Dave, this is classic Carlos. He sees it. Yep. He sees something. He knows what it is. but he's assuming that, the poor little dumb people out there don't know what it is, and I'm being least. That's exactly what he just admitted. That's unbelievable. What do you think, Dave?
I don't know what it means, so I don't know. You tell me, enlighten me.
It has to do
into Dave Birkett. How dare you?
It's a classic thing about how you set up. It's from the movies in the 1920s, really, but it has to do with how you set up a sense of place. It's a little bit more than that, but that's the easiest way to say it. Kind of a sense of place and the feeling for movies and what you're going to see on the screen. So
I just would have said sense of place then.
Because it's not quite sense of place, but you know what I mean? But that's right. So
not apparent, not really, I guess.
No, it's more about how you arrange. It's a sense of place, but also how you arrange things on a board to have them look when you're setting up a shot. So the feeling of how things are related to each other and where they in space and all that. Yeah.
I'll remember that for my next movie making class. So I don't, but no, I don't really have anything else to add other than that. I didn't know. I guess I'm the dumb.
No, you're not dumb. I mean, that has nothing to do with that. I just,
Sean just likes to make you feel dumber, make himself feel smarter.
No, I don't. I just assume people out there understand, right? I mean, it's English language. You know what I mean? So I just assume, and I read stuff all the time.
I'm not good with words.
Well, no, you're fine. You're fine with words. Don't you guys do? I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole here, but don't you guys find that you're reading something and you're like, I've seen that word. I don't remember where it was, or you haven't seen that word. It's rare that you haven't seen a word, but I immediately go look it up. I'm curious, like, oh, okay. If you can't figure it out in the context of the sentence, don't you guys do that some? You don't stop. I mean,
yes.
You know, when I read Dr. Seuss books to my kids, there's not many words that I come across that I don't know.
Those Dr. Seuss kids. Oh my God, kids are like in high school.
I thought Dr. Seuss was canceled. By the way,
was
Dr. Seuss canceled?
I guess, yeah, there probably were some books. Yeah, no, there were, because we had a couple of those books and I sold them on eBay for big money during the pandemic. So, yeah.
Mr. Entrepreneur. All right, what are we talking about with Michigan football, Carlos?
We're talking. They're 9-0. I want Dave Birkett's opinion here of if he thinks that his buddy Jim Harbaugh probably live in the same subdivision, I'm assuming, but how far do you think this team can this team go all the way, Dave? Can they beat Ohio State? Can they win a game in the college football playoff? What do you think? And are there any from what you're hearing from your many scout buddies? Are there any promising NFL, high draft picks from that team?
Well, we don't live in the same subdivision. We just happen to play basketball against each other, our kids, right? Baseball and all that good stuff. Look, I think frankly, I've been pleasantly surprised with how good they've been. You lose some of the defensive talent that they did last year, right? Aiden Hutchinson obviously playing for the Lions now, Ajabo, everyone else. Like, you just assume that maybe they're going to take a little bit of step back, but Blake Corum and that running game are so good. And that's something that they do so well at a time when there are not many teams in the NFL that do that I absolutely do think they have a shot. I mean, they right now, right? It's Georgia is the best team in college football, and they are loaded with draft prospects again. And flip a coin: is it Ohio State or Michigan? And I think Ohio State has the better win, right? They beat Notre Dame, and Michigan has probably looked better, especially of late. So that game in 2 weeks is, it's going to be something. And I do think whoever wins that game has a shot. They will be the 2 seed, presumably, in the playoffs. And that means, they wouldn't have to, right? If they're 2 and 3, those Big Ten teams, one of them is going to be the 4th seed and play Georgia. So I think you have a legit shot to get to the national championship game if you win that game. And look, Carlos had asked about we were talking about Blake Corum a little bit off the air, like, whether he should go pro or kind of, where he would stand. I always fall on the side of these guys getting their money. And I know they do now in the, with the NIL stuff and everything. And I just don't, I don't know that Blake Corum coming back is, it's not going to make him a first round pick. Bijan Robinson is the Texas guy. That is probably the best running back in college football and will be the first pick of the draft. Alabama obviously has a pretty good running back too, but I don't know, without having canvassed a bunch of NFL scouts, I think Corum's a guy that definitely gets drafted and, probably a mid-round guy and has a future in the NFL. So especially if Michigan has the type of tours this year, this might be for Michigan fans. You might want to enjoy Blake Corum while you have him, because I don't know how much longer he'll be around.
It's hard to imagine him coming back just because of the shelf life of these guys, right? The thing about Corum too, and I'll be curious to see if he can do this in the NFL. I mean, because he's got really good wiggle, right? Change of speed, change of direction. In fact, he had a touchdown run in the first drive Saturday night at Rutgers. I don't know, 30 some odd yards, where he just did a little in and out step and just dropped a guy and scored, which he's done all year. And it was called back because of an illegal formation, if I'm not, or too many guys in the back. I can't, one of those. Anyway, he can also, though, and he's got good speed, and he's not quite as quick straight ahead as his teammate, Donovan Edwards. He's got good speed, but man, he is coming into the season. I think a lot of people wondered if they were going to be able to get the tough yards that they did with Hassan Haskins a year ago, who was a really good college level between the tackles running back. Corum is every bit that, right? That's the thing. He can go in there. He is so hard to bring down for a guy who's 5'9". He's 5'9", and he's built though, but that's the thing. He can get out and make big plays, and he can go get you 3 yards on 3rd and 3, and that makes him really valuable.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, you look at, I think it was The Ringer wrote something interesting here a week or two ago, just about, look, we all know the way to win in the NFL, right, is you have an elite quarterback, right, a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, but we're sort of in this transitional phase, right? Brady is fading off, Aaron Rodgers fading off, right? Some of these guys have left, and, there's teams right now that are, they've built with a young, cheap quarterback, Miami Dolphins, right? And you sort of try to surround them with as much talent as possible, right? You get a couple, I heard someone compare it to the NBA, right? You get a couple scorers, the Miami's 2 receivers, and you put them on a roster with a cheap quarterback, and, maybe you get some playmakers on defense. And one part of that is having a running game, right? Look what Seattle did with Kenneth Walker and getting back to some of their basics, and some of these other teams, the Tennessee Titans, they're still a very relevant team in the NFL because they can run the football. And so I do think that, I don't know that running the football is back in vogue in the NFL, or how much it ever left. It's still a passing league, but yeah, when you can chew up yards like Blake Corum can, I do think there's a place for you to play in the NFL and probably have a pretty successful career at that level.
What do you think, Carl? It's not just about Corum, it's just about, can they go beat Ohio State and more?
I think there's a very real possibility of beating Ohio State. There's going to be, and Corum's going to be a big part of that, and it's also, that game there's a chance that game might decide the Heisman Trophy, right, between Stroud and Corum. And I don't know, Dave, I don't think the Heisman really matters that much as far as helping your draft stock. It doesn't hurt, I'm sure, but he's been very impressive. And I think he's listed as 5'8", which probably means he's 5'7", but
he's not very big.
He's not big, but he is impressive what he does. And one of these, smaller running backs can have success in the NFL, either as
Walker's 5'9", Carlos, right?
Yeah. They can, I think he's a little bigger, but yeah, girth wise, whatever. But yeah, I hope that Blake Corum gets a chance to go, definitely a second day pick. Hopefully maybe somebody takes a chance, you just know someone smart out there is going to take him in the second round. They're going to say he's overdrafted or whatever, but then he's going to have a pretty good career. If you're in the right system, if you've got a good offensive line, I would like to see what he does, but I definitely think, the Wolverines right now are just, it almost feels like they're a team of destiny in some ways, with everything that's gone right for them, everything that Jim Harbaugh has done, the way, your BFF, JJ McCarthy has played, Shawn, they've just, everything's worked out for them. The defense has gotten better, faster, all these different things. They really aren't, there aren't, other than maybe their, deep threat receivers, they don't have that one amazing receiver to take the top off the defense kind of guy. That's a little bit of their Achilles heel probably. But definitely, Ohio State looked beatable last week. I really, and imagine that, right? If you beat Ohio State 2 years in a row and you beat them at the horseshoe and everything, what this will mean. And that definitely the college football playoff ranking, Clemson was obviously fraudulent, shouldn't even have been in there, just got the SEC vote or whatever, however they got in there. But so it's shaken out the way it should be. It'll be interesting. And then, in another year, right, we're going to see what JJ McCarthy, where he goes, because he's the future of the NFL right now. He's, as Dave and his BFF Patrick Mahomes are, the running, throwing, dynamic quarterback that you can't get enough of.
Caleb Williams. I'm all on the USC train. Caleb Williams, best quarterback. Caleb
Williams, yeah. That's another one, right? Playing the tough Big Ten Far West right now. So, that's
the thing about McCarthy is that, and it's because he hadn't had to carry the offense at all, right? Because of Corum and Donovan Edwards and so forth. But McCarthy's not very big either. I mean, he's 6'1", maybe, right? And he's a little bit slight, but he's got all that arm power, and he's fairly accurate. The deep ball he's still working on a little bit, but I'll be curious to see against. I mean, maybe it's Ohio State, and if they get past Ohio State, it's definitely going to be Georgia. I don't know if there's not another defense out there like that, but that's what I want to see him. Can he compete at that level? And Carl's point about the receiver, it's not just they don't have a deep threat speed wise, because they've got plenty of speed receivers in their receiving group. They don't have somebody that goes 15 yards on and out and makes a contested catch up over the top, like what Keenan Coleman does for Michigan State and did against Michigan on their lone touchdown drive, right? He made a couple of NFL level catches, contested catches. They don't have anybody that's done that quite, but to your point, man, Dave, they got everything else. Their offensive line's better than it was a year ago. They got 3 leaguers there at least, including a transfer from Virginia, the center, who's been really, exactly. They're physical in a different way than they even were a year ago. Defensively, their back seven's a lot faster. They lost all those guys, but they just run a lot better. And then McCarthy can make throws that McNamara can't. And Corum is better than Haskins, which is crazy to say. They may lose to Ohio State, but they're better this year. They may beat them and get to Georgia. And to me, they're more suited. They're built better to compete with that level of athlete. They may not have a bunch of first rounders on this team, but they probably have 10, guys that are either going to get drafted or invited camps, maybe more by the time, if you start include the young guys are going to be available to get drafted in a couple of years. They've got some talent.
I don't know. If you look at the 2 fan bases for Ohio State and Michigan, I think you would think that the Ohio State fan base right now has to be really worried about Michigan. They've got to be nervous about that game.
Absolutely.
And I think the Wolverine fan base is not worried. They're excited about going into the shoehorn and handing them another huge loss.
Right.
And I don't know.
They're not confident.
I don't know. I don't know. I apparently I'm not qualified to talk about fan bases.
No, you're really not. But that's
I'm not
okay.
even sure if this qualifies as a rivalry, Shawn, between Ohio State and Michigan. You tell me if that's a rivalry.
No, but that's nice that you're comparing Green Bay to Detroit to this. No, but you're right, Carlos. This is it. And Dave covered this team, and you were out here in Ann Arbor for a while. The difference this year, even from last year, is that I don't think they're expecting a win necessarily in Columbus. But they know for the first time in forever, they can go down and compete. And then because the last couple of times they've been down there, they lost by 40, you know what I mean? And they know they can compete this year. And that's a totally different vibe. I don't think they're cocky that they're going to go win, but it's different for sure.
I think the fan, I don't know. I would think the fan base is, depends on what happens in the next week or two, but they're probably, I would guess the fan base is expecting them to come damn close to winning, if not.
Yeah, to give them a game for sure. For sure.
Maybe more than that.
There's no question. There's a little bit too much PTSD with the, 15 out of 17 or whatever it was losing and the way they have been beaten recently. But last year washed a lot of that. It did here, but winning, they still haven't won in Columbus in 20 years, right? So there's still a little bit of that, but there is no question that I think this fan base understands this team can go compete there. Getting to Georgia, that's a different matter. But all right, Dave, you done with this, or you got a little more time?
I'm around for whatever you need.
All right, because we got to do the favorite thing, and so I think you've done that with us before. Let's take one more quick break and come back and wrap this show up. And Carlos can tell us about his favorite thing, and you can do, Dave. All right, we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.
Hello. I'm Phil Friend, the host and producer of Spartan Speak, a podcast collaboration between the Detroit Free Press and Lansing State Journal focusing on Michigan State sports. Each week, I'm joined by the OGs of the MSU podcasting game, Freak beat writer Chris Laurie and LSJ sports columnist Graham Couch, as we discuss and dissect the latest sports news coming out of East Lansing. Not only is Spartan Speak one of, if not the longest-running MSU sports podcast out there, you won't find a show with two people as clued into the Spartans as Chris and Graham, each of whom have spent a decade plus covering MSU and bring years of institutional knowledge and insight to the podcast. And once in a while, they'll let me throw out a take as well. Along with discussing the latest news, we'll break down the Spartans' last game on the hardwood and the gridiron. What went right? What went wrong? Jet sweep. Again? For both Mel Tucker and Tom Izzo, get you ready for the next game, make predictions, and so much more. We can also guarantee at least one reference to Kalamazoo every podcast. So if you haven't already, download, subscribe, and listen to Spartan Speak on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on your podcast app of choice.
Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, it's the time of the show. It's my favorite thing, and I would like you, who grew up in Los Angeles, to go first.
Thank you. Wow, I finally got to be from LA. Thanks, Shawn. Yeah, my favorite thing, and then I know this is very foreign to you and Dave, but my favorite thing was going to the Red Wings game last week, Thursday. They were playing Washington, and they were celebrating the 25th anniversary of their Stanley Cup that they beat. They won that year. They beat Philadelphia, I want to say, but they finally beat the Colorado Avalanche in the West Conference Finals, and it was a big moment for the team. And so they brought back a lot of the players, the big ones, the Brendan Shanahan. Some of the Russians couldn't quite make it because there's a little problem over there in Russia right now, but the big one was Scotty Bowman, their iconic coach, the best coach in hockey history. And my two favorite things of that were Scotty's 89 years old now. I couldn't believe it. I mean, Helena St. James, our Red Wings writer, looked it up, and I would have just guessed he was maybe in his early 80s, maybe late 70s. And I mean, the guy was sharp as a tack. We were asking him questions in the pregame, press conference. And I mean, he was going through, rule changes and things in the NHL and trends he didn't like and line combinations and players in Buffalo and all that. I mean, the guy sounded like he could coach tomorrow. It was just so cool to be able to listen to someone like that. And you never know, age treats people differently over time, but it was just heartening to see that and to see the players respond to him. Igor Lariana was there and McCarty and those guys. And it was just fun. It was a little bit of recapturing. If you're a hockey fan, which I don't know if I don't think either of you ever been to paid to watch an NHL game, but if you're
that's the one that kicked the ball.
It's like soccer and ice, Dave. You're right. It's close to that. But yeah, it was for a hockey fan like me who grew up during that time and appreciated the Red Wings from afar in Los Angeles. It was cool to see that they brought out the Stanley Cup, by the way. It was sitting there at center ice. And by the way, Steve Yzerman made sure not to touch the Stanley Cup while he was there as the general manager, of course. But it was just a cool kind of throwback day. The fans really liked it. It was a little bit of a hint of maybe the Red Wings are on the path to possibly recapturing some of that glory. And by the way, one little aside to this whole thing, Dave, and you talked about quality wins and all that, and Shawn doesn't think there's any rivalry in the NFL. It doesn't exist. But one thing Steve Yzerman has brought up is one of the issues that they had last year was that even though their record got better and they showed promise and everything, they didn't beat good teams. And that's what he wants to see. And I'm glad that, sports are different, but I like it when general managers and maybe even coaches acknowledge that quality of opponent does matter, significance does matter in certain victories. Because end of the season games when whatever, people are sitting players and whatever doesn't really add up to a whole lot. So it was just a nice night. I'm glad I was there, and we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll have a little playoff run toward the end of the year and season, and maybe Shawn Windsor will actually get to a hockey game then when there's travel to be had.
No, Dave.
Very important.
Yeah, Dave. It's Yeah, Dave, I'd like you to go, but before let's get back to this rivalry.
Rebuttal to my favorite thing? No, this is the first.
No. It's a great
like closing arguments. You can't rebuttal.
It's a great favorite thing. It's just this idea of NFL rivalries. I mean, the Colts and the Patriots were for a while, but they're not anymore. That's the thing about the NFL. They don't. And by the way, the Packers and the Vikings and the Packers and the Bears are probably bigger rivals than the Lions or the Packers, right? It's just
Packers and Bears for sure.
Yeah, yes. and Packers and Vikings because they're right next to each other. But well, they're not that far, but apart. In any case, yeah, it's right. A different. Go ahead, Dave. What's your favorite thing? Because
I love talking hockey, so Carlos stole mine. God,
you pulled the Shawn Windsor judo move.
No. I mean, but I think I might go to a hockey game next month, Carlos. So just, my son's friend.
Who's comping you the tickets?
Birthday and there.
When's the last time you bought hockey tickets to a Red Wings game, Dave? Ever?
How old am I? Yeah, no, I don't think ever. I mean, if it's free, it's me, right? I've always said that my favorite school is FSU, Free Stuff University. So that's who I support. All right, favorite thing. I really honestly, I thought about going with, you guys are familiar with the horse Cody's Wish. I don't know if you saw that. I saw it on ESPN last week. I thought it was an awesome story. The horse that won was named after, a child that's dealing with, some very rare disease. And it, was one of those things that brought me to, got a little misty in the room there and everything. It was just a cool story. But just to stay on brand, since every time I do this, I think I say something about the kids, right? So my favorite thing is that it's basketball season. Basketball season is starting for my team. We had tryouts on Monday, and we're recording this on Tuesday. Monday and Tuesday were our tryouts, and so I got that juice going, man. Like the season is here. I'm excited about the next couple months and see what this thing brings. I've mentioned this before, right? My daughter's in 8th grade, so this is kind of our last run with this team, and then they'll all splinter and go to their different high schools. But it was good being back on the basketball court Monday night for our first round of tryouts, and just to get the champs back together again and see what we got in store for this year. So that's my favorite thing, getting back on the hardwood and getting back to coaching for one last time.
That's really awesome, right, Carlos? And by the way, that was nice and short, right, Carlos?
Yeah.
No need for a rebuttal.
No rebuttal. By the way, last time I paid hockey tickets was when my kids were a little bit younger, and I took them to see the Penguins, and the crowd chanted Cindy Crosby the whole time. I'm like, oh, that was funny. They had fun doing that. So it's been a while, though, to Carlos's point.
Sean's kids are in their 50s now, by the way.
No, they're not. So that would have been, I don't know. It's been in the last 10 years. In any case, to answer your question, Carlos, and I used to go New Year's Eve for whatever weird reason.
That is weird.
A couple of times. Yeah, I saw the Bruins one time. And anyway.
Oh, they play an afternoon game, right, on New Year's Eve.
Yeah. It was in the evening. Right? No, it was
really?
the ones I went to. Yeah, I remember being dark. So, of course, it gets dark at 5:30.
Those the pops. Those are the pops that you. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway. All right, real quickly, my favorite thing is I went to Rutgers, from Michigan Rutgers. Went into Newark.
Hold off the story.
Yeah. I flew to Newark and stayed in Newark. And normally I go into the city and I don't know, maybe it's just I'm getting older or whatever. And there's a series of trains you take to get into the city. And I love that normally. But I had a little time. My flight was delayed. I had a little time Sunday. And I had a rental car, which I never do in that area, but I did because I wanted, it was a night game. Didn't want to get stuck at Rutgers trying to find an Uber. Anyway, so I thought, I love diners. I cooked in diners. I cooked diners. I was a shorter cook in diners, cooking through school. I had one of my history classes, a pop American history class, where I took a trip to Pennsylvania and Philadelphia to go to diners to hang out, to write about the influence of American diners and food and all that. So anyway, I love them.
In college?
In college, yeah. I drove.
You were taking road trips in college? Okay. All right. Sorry.
Just for a class for a term paper. Anyway, I mean, it was cheap. Gas was $1, whatever. You stayed at $20 a night hotels. And you made it happen. Orange County, maybe you don't do that as much, but
we fly everywhere private in Orange County.
In any case, I thought I'm going to go to a diner. I don't need to go into New York City. That Carlos is elitist place, with his Waldorf Astoria hotel bills and so forth. So I drove up to Hackensack, which is, 25 minutes north of Newark, 30 depending on the traffic. and went to this little place called White Mana, and it's a diner, but they served 3 things. They had a little horseshoe countertop, Dave, with about 8 stools that were so low it's almost like you're sitting on the ground. And then a little further, one more ring with about 8 more stools, and that was it. It was like room for 16 people. It was wall-to-wall people, and there was a grill in the middle, and all they made were sliders, ground meat, patties, onions on them, and they put American cheese with a potato bun, and then they had fries and shakes, and that was it. And they've been there for 80 years, and you call everything out, and it was fabulous. There was a guy next to me kind of helping me out with the order of little things, because it was a little bit like the soup Nazi. You don't. The gal at the grill would say, "What do you want?" And the people would say, "Well, I want this and fries and this shake." And she's like, No. Just tell me what you want on your burger. Right now, we're starting with that. And it was awesome. And the sliders were great. You would have loved it, Dave, although you would have said no pickle or ketchup or anything. But
just cheese.
Just cheese. No onions, right?
Nothing.
Dave counts cheese as a vegetable, by the way.
This is where they put this great meat on a flat top that they've been cooking on for all these years, and then they press the onions into the meat, and then the juices, the onions mix. Carlos knows what I'm talking about. It's anyway. And because of inflation, they raised the price to $1.80. Before COVID, they were $1.12. So our editor was happy about that bill, right? So
who told you how to find this place? That's what I want to know.
I mean, New Jersey's kind of the home, and Pennsylvania, western or eastern Pennsylvania. It's the birthplace of diners, right? And so when I was younger, I would always seek out new ones. I almost went to a place called TikTok, but I wanted to go to this one. It's called White Mana, and anyway, it was awesome. It wasn't like the Pennsylvania thing, Carlos, where they got political and all that little diner last year. Outside.
That was a great story.
It wasn't like that. This was just people were just happy and enjoying. And I mean, who wouldn't be? $1.50 hamburger, right? That's delicious on a grill that's been there for 70 years. Anyway, that was my favorite thing.
By the way, one since you got a rebuttal, I get a little bit of a rebuttal. Is I've been lucky enough to eat in some really expensive restaurants and stuff, and humble brag. But the most intimidated I've ever been anywhere ordering food was when I went to Pat's Cheesesteaks in Philadelphia for the first time and had to order. And I was like, and my wife lived in Philadelphia, and she was from, she knew she'd been there before, but I was like studying how to order the food because I didn't want to screw it up, because you get yelled at in diners and those kind of places. And I was just like, okay, they're going to ask for, with cheese or whatever, and this and that, and, whatever the ordering, protocol was. So that's no matter where I've been, I've always been, you're right, Shawn, just tell me what you want.
Yeah. No, especially in the East Coast, right? It's
they're not shy about telling you you're an idiot.
No. But this place was fun. And the guy next to me ordered 10. A young guy ordered 10. And I looked at him and I said, "You can eat 10. And I knew it wasn't all for him. And it was right. But I said, "You're going to eat 10, really?" He started laughing. He said, "No, I'm going to eat 5. I'm like, "Oh my God." Because I was going to have just a couple. And then he said 5. And I said, I'll get 3. And even that was too many. I mean, they're small. They're sliders, but still.
Are they bigger than the White Castle or about the same size?
A little bit. And a whole lot better. I mean, and I like a White Castle. I have a guilty pleasure for that.
Shawn, you going to New York for either Lions
The second
games?
one. The second one.
Okay.
Yeah. Our colleague Jeff Seidel's got the first one for the Giants.
Maybe we can hit it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can just tell them no onions.
There you go.
I'll take you there.
Just give me the patty in my hand is what Dave's going to want.
That would be my pleasure. Let's do that.
Well, we'll see what time our flights get in at, but if we can make it happen, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, let's do that. In any case, all right, Carlos, do you want to take us out this week?
Yeah, we'd like to thank, first of all, the great Dave Birkett for joining us once again. The honorarium check is in the mail, Dave. You should get it in 5 to 10 business days. But mostly we want to thank our producer, Andrew Hammond, who puts up with our ridiculousness every week. Executive producer, Queen of the World, Anjanette Delgado. Executive producer, King of the World, Kirkland Crawford. And the big man himself, Peter Bhatia. And where do you find Dave doesn't know where to find this podcast, Shawn. Where do you find it?
Does anybody? I mean, really? I mean, obviously you can find it on our homepage at thefreep.com, but you can also find it at Spotify. You can find it at Apple. You can find wherever you find your favorite podcast, Carlos.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, Dave, go to Free.
You can find it on my Twitter feed when I retweet.
There you go.
He's going to retweet us finally. Great.
It depends. We'll see. Only if you pay off that lunch.
We'll have you back soon. You can talk about the blue check and if you're going to keep it or not.
I don't have it. I never had it. I'm a man of the people.
You don't need it.
I've never had it. That's right.
Are you going to pony up the $8 now to get it?
Hell no. Come on, you know me.
Oh, he almost got bleeped. Uh-oh.
Oh, is that something we can't say on here?
No. We're
right.
G minus.
Sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, no, we're doing good. Dave, thanks for joining us, man. It's always a blast to have you on.
You got it, guys. Carlos, I'll see you in Allen Park Wednesday. Shawn, I'll see you in like a month and a half next time you're at a game.
I see how it is. You go back and forth to who you're going to poke about this.
Used to be the other way around.
No, I've been out there recently. I've been out there. Was out there last week. Yeah, I saw you last week. Come on, man. You let me in the building.
You're right.
And you weren't there. You were somewhere one of those days. That was shocking. Anyway, all right. Let's wrap this up. Let's thank the listeners, Carlos. We're grateful for anybody who spends the time, as you say, with our ridiculousness and our silliness. We try to have a little fun here, and we will try to have some more fun next week when we'll be back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.